we can't just like have theory groups and just study by ourselves. We have to like go and learn from the people. He talks about if you want to learn what a pear tastes like, you have to change the pear by eating it. Abstractions and theory disconnected from the real world don't get us anywhere. Like, Marxism is useless if you're not applying it. What are you doing it for?
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, a production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today our guest is Josh Sykes, who is a return guest. He's the author of The Revolutionary Science of Marxism-Leninism, which we talked about in a previous episode, and if you haven't heard that one, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to it, and also I'd encourage you to buy the book. But we invited Josh here, who's an old friend, because he continues to write for Fight Back News, but he also recently wrote. I'm going to hold up the book for those of you watching on YouTube. It's called People's China at 75. The Flag's Still Red, and it's edited by Keith Bennett and Carlos Martinez, and Josh wrote a chapter in this book called Mao, China, and the Development of Marxism-Leninism. And so we're going to be talking about that a little bit today. But welcome to Fight Back Radio, Josh.
Hey, thank you for having me back, Richard. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive right into it. The title of the chapter is Mao, China, and the Development of Marxism-Leninism. So let's talk about Mao Zedong a little bit. Who is Mao Zedong, and why'd you take the time to write a chapter about his theories?
Mao was the sort of founding principal leader of the Communist Party of China. During the beginning of the Chinese Revolution up until his death in the late 70s, 1977. We study him because we want to understand and learn the lessons of the revolution and the summation that he and others made in that struggle. And there's a lot of very helpful key ideas that are important to Marxism-Leninism and revolutionary theory in general that we can draw from Mao. The book was published, sort of spearheaded by the Friends of Socialist China to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China.
Okay, so let me ask you a little more about Mao's background, though. And I don't. This is not going to be a biography of Mao, but he was he was a founder of the party and the principal person for through the revolution and up until he died in the mid 70s. But what's his background? I mean, was he a rich guy? Was he a worker? Who was this guy?
He came from a peasant family. He wasn't a worker. He was a teacher who became interested in the sort of nationalist movement to get the colonial powers out of China, and he became involved in the student movement, and from that. As Marxism started to make its way into China following the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, he and others came together to form a communist party. He was a petty bourgeois intellectual.
Okay. Well, let me ask you about. I want to ask you a little bit about Mao Zedong thought. I mean, when I was young and in college in the late 70s, early 80s, there was. Mao had, there was the Mao's Red Book, the quotations from Mao Zedong, which was it was banned here or difficult to get, but then it became widely popular throughout the world and in China. The Chinese Communist Party today, when you're looking at the chapter of your book, talks about Mao's contributions along with people like Zhu Di, Chen Yun, Zhou Enlai, Liu Shaoxi, Deng Xiaoping are mentioned here. That collectively, that's considered a Mao Zedong thought. But there's also, there was this view, and I think you underline it in your chapter in this book, about that many of Mao's ideas were universal, and some of the Chinese talk about Mao Zedong thought in terms of being Marxism-Leninism with Chinese characters and that sort of thing. Can you clarify this a little bit? What's your thoughts on Mao's writings and how it's viewed by others as well?
Yeah, sure. Just like Lenin creatively applied Marxism to his situation in the Tsarist Empire, in Tsarist Russia, Mao likewise applied Marxism to the particular concrete conditions that they found themselves in China. And those conditions are pretty significantly different than the conditions that you see in a major capitalist country like the United States, or even like a sort of low on the pole capitalist country like Russia was at the time of the Bolshevik Revolution. China was colonized by the British and the Japanese, and part of the way that Mao developed Marxism was to understand how to apply Marxism to that particular situation that was distinct and different. You have a semi-feudal, semi-colonial country dominated by foreign powers with the collusion of comprador class of local warlords, you have a very large country. You have majority peasant country, and so Mao was working to figure out how to make Marxism work in that scenario. So in one sense, Marxism is, or Mao Zedong thought is Marxism applied to China. But because we can draw general lessons from particular struggles, there are universal aspects to what Mao did and thought and theorized, right? So, and these are he made universal contributions to ideas like how we understand dialectical and historical materialism, ideas like the mass line, or like how the Chinese conducted armed struggle is applicable to lots of countries that are similar in its conditions, not just China, right? Things like that. So, I would consider Mao on par with the sort of main theorists of Marxism. That's not to say that you have to, follow Mao Zedong thought or you're not a Marxist, right? But it is to say that his contributions are broadly applicable, and we would do well to study them closely and learn from them.
Yeah, I want to dig into some of them here a little bit, and you scratch at them in the chapter in the book there as well. But I want to encourage our Fight Back Radio listeners to pick up Mao yourself if you haven't already, and look at it and read the full text of these things, because I think there's a lot to be learned from that. But Mao looked at Marxism as a science, as you do, your book, The Revolutionary Science of Marxism-Leninism, and I'd encourage people to pick that up. But I want to start with some of his writings about the Marxist theory of knowledge, and could you talk a little bit about what the Marxist theory of knowledge is, and why that's important?
Yeah, the most important article that he wrote on that is on practice, and and everyone should study it. And the sort of gist of it is that it's through practice, our practical experiences, that we come to understand the world that we live in, and that by engaging with the world and actively working to change the world, we understand it better, and then can apply that better understanding to changing it better, right? So that's an idea of, he says, practice, theory, practice. So you start with, your like basic understanding of a situation, whatever you have, and he talks about it in terms of perceptual knowledge and rational knowledge. You start with perceptual knowledge, just the things that you see, your sense perceptions, and then based on that, you develop theories and ideas that like sort of put those sense perceptions together into some coherent understanding of the situation. Then you take that and apply it to real practical work in the real world, whether that's in like scientific experiment, in production, or in like revolutionary activity. And then you look at your results, you sum up what happens, and you hone and refine your theory, and then you do it again, and you repeat this process again and again, and your knowledge develops in a spiral formation as it gets higher and higher and elevates to a higher level, and you have a better understanding of the situation, better practice, better theory, better practice, better theory, until you're really getting somewhere.
So this seems to have very practical application for activists. So if I'm trying to figure out how to get more money on my job or whatever, and I'd say, okay, well, maybe I'll go talk to the boss, and that doesn't work. Then I come back and say, well, maybe I have another idea. I'll talk to my coworkers and organize them, or whatever the situation is. But that you're fine tuning as in being engaged with the actual situation they're changing. But you can come back and this through cycles of theory and practice. If you do it systematically, you'll consistently be more effective, it seems to me. I mean, that seems to be the point to it.
Yeah, you sum up your experiences. Ideally, you want to do it collectively. Like two heads are better than one, right? And you have a collective summation that's able to get beyond just your particular biases and limitations of your own perspective, and you can come to even better and more clear understanding.
Yeah.
That's like part of what the mass line is about too, which we can talk about later.
Yeah. Let's. I want to get into that as well, but let's move. I wanted to move next to the idea. You say that Marx had particular. I mean, Mao had particular contributions to the idea of dialectical materialism. And maybe you can give just a very brief, and I know it can be complicated, but a description of what dialectical materialism is. But then so that we can look at what were Mao's contributions. And again, I want to circle back to. Let me hold up your book. You go through all of this stuff in the revolutionary science of Marxism-Leninism. So I encourage people, and in a way that's very understandable as well, I would say. So I encourage people to get that book as well. But what is dialectical materialism, and what did Mao do that advanced that idea?
Yeah, I guess if you want the really quick summation, the People's China 75 really kind of condenses it down, and then the Revolutionary Science book sort of expands on it over several chapters and talks about it. So I think you'll have a better time with the bigger book. But the long and short of it is that he has an essay called On Contradiction, which is sort of the accompanying essay to On Practice. And when we do our practice, we don't want to just do it in any old way, right? We can start with Marxist theory, right? And we can apply that to our practice rather than just whatever our blank sense impressions are. We already have come, like, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Like, we don't have to start from scratch and reinvent the wheel. We've got Marxism-Leninism, so we can apply dialectical materialism, which is what Mao talks about on practice, to analyze the not on practice, on contradiction, analyze the contradictions that are at work in a situation that we find ourselves in, whether that's a situation at work with our boss, whether the situation is we're trying to navigate some social movement, we're trying to understand what's happening in Palestine or Syria or something like that. We're trying to understand the elections. Whatever it is, we're trying to figure out how to relate to it and how to change that situation, not just understand it, but change it. And what Mao gives us in On Contradiction is a really, for the first time in Marxism, a systematic way of looking at the way contradictions interact and interrelate as sort of like, not just as a sort of linear process, but as this more complex web of contradictions. So we have like a principal contradiction and secondary contradictions, for example. And the principal contradiction is, and every time we talk about a contradiction, we're just talking about two opposing forces, right? Like the working class and the bosses. There's a contradiction there, right? These two forces are opposed to each other, and they can't get around it. The only way to resolve the contradiction is struggle. So contradiction is about struggle. And when Mao talks about contradiction, he's talking about forces that are two opposing forces that are struggling with each other. And so when we talk about the primary contradiction, the principal contradiction, that's the struggle that's sort of driving the whole situation forward. And if we can locate and resolve that principal contradiction, then we can fundamentally change what's happening. And he talks about the way that happens in terms of every contradiction, he says, has two aspects, right? So in the case of bosses and workers, the boss is one aspect, it's one side, and the workers are the other aspect, the other side, right? And there's a power imbalance there, right? So under capitalism, in your average workplace, the boss has all the power, and the workers, they've got, nothing. What they actually have is the ability to organize and unite with each other and use their numbers and their organizational power to build a power that can challenge the owning power that the boss has. The boss can fire one worker, but he can't fire all of them, right? So Mao talks about this in terms of quantitative and qualitative change, that quantity, as the workers build up their force, can overcome the force of the boss as it gets strong enough. And there's a qualitative shift where the two aspects of the contradiction, the bosses and the workers, exchange places in terms of who has the power and who doesn't, right? And that's what organization can do. So he talks about other stuff in that article too, like antagonistic and non-antagonistic contradictions and things like that. But the main thing, if you're going to really want to drill it down to one lesson of On Contradiction, is to understand that we need to find the principal contradiction in a situation, and that the two, through the buildup of quantitative change, the two aspects of a contradiction, the two forces opposed to each other, can exchange places, leading to a qualitative leap.
Okay, so let's. One thing that, and we'll circle back to some of the stuff about antagonistic and non-antagonistic contradiction. But one thing that surprised me is these two articles that you mentioned on contradiction and on practice are very accessible in terms of readings of philosophy compared to others. And I know, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I believe he gave these as speeches that were later edited at the anti-Japanese school, because Japan had invaded China, and they were so they were in the middle of a war to try to kick Japan out of their country, and the Chinese Communist Party was up in the province Yunnan, I think I might be mispronouncing it, but but that they in the middle of the war they said, okay, well, this is important stuff. We need to sit down and get our Marxism straight, and both our theories and our practice. And he gave these speeches, and whatever. Now they're amongst the most read things of Mao, I think.
Yeah, there's a reason that he thought it was particularly important. And there was a political struggle in the Chinese Communist Party at the time, and there were errors that were being made, and those errors, Mao identified them as dogmatism and empiricism. So the dogmatism error is that people thought they would just like copy from the Bolsheviks, copy from the Soviet Union, and just paste that onto China, rather than come up with a real analysis of Chinese conditions and try to like figure out what was going on and how to like really apply Marxism to doing a revolution in China. And the empiricism error was an error that like we don't really need theory, right? We can just like look at the world as it is, and the things that what we need to do will just sort of be revealed to us, right? So on practice and on contradiction were meant to be antidotes to those illnesses that were inflicting the party. And the way that Mao saw to do that was to educate everyone in the party as to how to do Marxist analysis, and to teach everyone how to understand the primacy of practice in Marxist work. A big part of on practice is to say that we have to build the party in contact with the masses through mass work, right? We can't just like have theory groups and just study by ourselves. We have to like go and learn from the people. He talks about if you want to learn what a pear tastes like, you have to change the pear by eating it. So, he's a person who understands that abstractions and theory disconnected from the real world don't get us anywhere. Like Marxism is useless if you're not applying it. What are you doing it for?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I want to move next to and there's a lot in this chapter that you wrote here, but so we're moving through it, and I want to encourage our listeners to take a little bit of this or whatever you're interested in, and go look at it yourself, and certainly buy the book. But you talk about historical materialism, which was one of the the cornerstone of what Karl Marx and Frederick Engels developed in their theories. And how did Mao use, and what was his approach, and what did he contribute to the ideas of historical materialism?
Well, I think that like one thing that's worth understanding in terms of historical materialism is the way that ideology functions, right? Historical materialism explains that like change in society happens because of material processes, not because of our ideas. And that, in fact, it's from our material reality and that our ideas arise, right? And without getting like too deep in the weeds, there's an idea that the mode of production, the way that society produces and organizes production, it results in the formation of a superstructure, which includes like the state and the way the government functions. In the U.S., that'd be things like the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the Senate and the Congress and the presidency. All those things are part of the superstructure. The superstructure also includes things like the universities, the media, the newspapers, television shows, everything like that. But it doesn't just include like Fox News, right? It also includes Fight Back Radio. And that's an important thing that Mao pushed forward, is that every thought and every idea is stamped with the brand of a class, right? And that whereas in capitalist society, the ideas of the bourgeoisie are dominant because they're the ruling class. Their ideas are also ruling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their theories, their news, their media, all those things are the dominant superstructure of society. But there's also the proletarian ideology, Marxism, all of that also arises from the class struggle in capitalist society, but it's subordinate because we're not in power, right? We're in a weakened state, and as the proletariat becomes more class conscious and becomes more organized, our ideology will also take a stronger and more prominent role until we're able to make those two aspects of the contradiction exchange places. So there was always an idea in Marxism of the superstructure drawing from the economic base and then turning around and reinforcing that base. That's basic historical materialism. Mao sort of brought forward this idea that proletarian ideology is also like growing out of bourgeois society, right? And that it's gonna that it can contend for power in the same way that we contend for power in like through force on the shop floor.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, let me I want to move on a little bit again here. So Mao Zedong was a communist revolutionary. He wanted, he sought, and actually, as part of the Chinese Communist Party, they succeeded in having a revolution and overthrowing their government and the imperialists, that including the Japanese and the United States and others that were dominant in their country. So I mean, you mentioned in your chapter some aspects that Mao contributed to revolutionary strategy, and I want to touch on these a little bit as well. Earlier you talked about mass line, so I said I'd circle back. Here we are now back. So what is mass line, and for Mao Zedong, what was his contribution to the revolutionary strategy by putting forward this idea of mass line?
Let me put it this way. Mao talked about that. He said the revolution in China had three magic weapons. And those three magic weapons are the United Front, party building, and the armed struggle, right? And the mass line in particular, I kind of think of the mass line as the bridge between our theory and the actual revolutionary activity of the like broader masses. So whenever we're involved in a struggle, we want to do it with as many people as we can, right? Always bring a crowd, is the saying, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that as Marxist-Leninists, I guess I'm talking about the United Front first, so we'll do that and then we'll go to the mass line. As Marxist-Leninists, when we're organized in a way that requires a high level of unity and discipline, and that precludes the like broad masses in their millions from being a part of that organization. And we want to organize more broadly than just with those people. It's going to take the broad masses in their millions to revolutionize society. So the way we do that is we organize a united front to organize everyone who can be united against our common enemy, which is the capitalist system, right? And the way we do that is, Mao talked about in analysis of classes in Chinese society, who are our friends and who are our enemies. We're going to look at different class forces that we can unite and put together. And Mao, in the Chinese Revolution, identified four, which are the working class, which is at the core of it, the peasantry, the petty bourgeoisie, and the national bourgeoisie. And so he said, we're going to unite all these forces together to fight against imperialism and get China liberated. And this is sort of the basis of new democracy in China, is this block of four classes. But when we talk about a united front, we're talking about uniting different class forces. But it sort of comes together in mass organizations. Like we have trade unions that we work in. We have groups that are fighting for community control of the police that we're working in. We have groups that are working for Palestinian liberation, student organizations, all that stuff. And we want to organize as broadly as we can, which means that we don't want those groups to be Marxist-Leninist groups. Like their mass character is valuable and important as it is, right? We want them to have that sort of mass character and a broader level of unity than what they would have just with us. But so the mass line is how the party organization connects to the united front, which is that we talk about the masses go to, like, starting with the masses' felt needs and experiences and the demands that come from the advanced among those masses. So we take and we look at those demands, whether they're for stopping police crimes or getting better wages, better benefits, things like that. And we apply Marxism to that. And we look at the contradictions at work. And we go and we take those demands and we try to build campaigns out of it. And ways that we can not just do things like form, there's like an idea in activism of just like doing like mutual aid work and things like that, stuff that just like is going to help sort of patch up the immediate problems of capitalism, giving out food, things like that. Those are good things to do, but they don't like directly confront the class enemy, which is part of like how we're going to build consciousness. And so we start from these immediate demands and build a campaign that confronts the enemy. And by relying upon the advanced masses in this work, we can draw in the broader intermediate folks, the folks who are like kind of active, maybe not, they pay attention, maybe not. We want to bring in as many of those people as possible and raise their level, bring as many of them into the struggle as we can, and ideally bring as many into the advanced as we can over time. And we have to rely on the advanced to do that. And by bringing all those people in, then there are also backwards people in all these struggles who are trying to say, well, they have backwards ideas. Maybe they have like white chauvinist ideas, or they think that they're like, pro-Trump people, stuff like that. We want to either win those people over or isolate them. If we can win them over, great. If we can't, we need to isolate them and get them out of the way. And by doing this is a way that a small group of people can mobilize large masses of people by focusing on these immediate demands of the advanced. And by doing that, we can land blows against the enemy that we're trying to organize against. We want to hurt them. We want them to not succeed at the things that they're trying to do. We want to build our own organization. We want to build class, like our Marxist organization. We want to build the mass organizations. We want to raise people's consciousness. And we want to bring these advanced people over to Marxism so that we can build the party. And that's really the gist of the mass line in a nutshell, is just like start with the advanced and expand outward, bring in as many people as you can, and fight.
Okay. So, yeah, no, this is interesting. I want to move forward to a little bit about socialist China, and we had all these ideas that Mao had and that were implemented by the Chinese Communist Party, were successful. So they in 1949, the Chinese took state power. But the country, different than ours, was overwhelmingly made up of peasants. It wasn't, there was you had a working class party, but a country that was made up largely of peasants. And Mao talked about new democracy and stages of the revolution in the early days, especially. Can you talk a little bit about what what he meant by new democracy and how how the revolution developed, how this contradiction of having a working class party in a country that's overwhelmingly peasants, even if you overthrow the bourgeoisie, how do you build socialism?
Yeah, the socialism is ultimately working class state power, right? And Lenin called it, and Marx called it before him, the dictatorship of the proletariat, right? That every state is a dictatorship of one class over another. Bourgeois democracy is the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie over the proletariat, and we want to flip that over and exercise power over the bourgeoisie to to be able to like bring forth a working class agenda, to be able to plan society in a way that eliminates the anarchy of production and the constant crises of overproduction that come from capitalism, but also to stop the bourgeoisie from trying to restore capitalism like they did in the Soviet Union and in Eastern Europe. And so in a predominantly peasant country like China, you have what he called a people's democratic dictatorship, which is like a dictatorship of the proletariat of a particular type, of a type that's like unique to China and China's experience, where the working class and the Communist Party are in the lead, but they're in the lead in an alliance with the peasantry, the petty bourgeoisie, and the national bourgeoisie. If you look at the Chinese state flag, you have that one star and the four stars around it, right? The one star is the Communist Party, and the four other stars are those four classes that are united in the Chinese government. And the Chinese Communist Party, the Communist Party of China, is the ruling party and the party that's doing the planning of the economy and stuff like that. But the other forces, the other class forces, also have parties that are involved in sort of like a consultative role in how to like plan and steer the government and move China forward, because you can't rule a country like that if you leave those forces behind. You can't fight everyone in the country and succeed. That's not really the goal of Marxism. So Mao talked about stages, right? There's the new democratic revolution, which the purpose was to get rid of the last vestiges of feudalism and colonialism in order to prepare the ground for building socialism. That meant collectivizing agriculture, getting tractors and things like that into the country, mechanizing agriculture, getting these basic things that were needed into place before you could do things like build heavy industry and start to plan society in a socialist direction. The socialist construction that would take place. This new democratic period would take place from 1949 to the mid 50s, and then after that, you have socialist construction in China moving forward. But even that, the Chinese talk about it in terms of they're in like a very early lower phase of socialism, and that they're going to be in this phase for a very long time as they develop their productive forces and do the things that are required to get rid of scarcity, combat poverty. Like, you're talking about a country that was in a very backwards, one of the poorest countries on earth at the time of the revolution, right? Exploited brutally by the imperialists and colonialists that dominated it for so long. And so there's a lot of catching up to do. And even though right now China's like living in the future compared to the United States, they have amazing high-speed rail. They lead the world in terms of like building and developing green energy, and they've eradicated completely absolute poverty, these are amazing achievements. They've wiped out illiteracy. They have far better literacy rate than the United States. They brought healthcare and medicine to the people. They've made all these great achievements, but they still say we're a long way off from advancing to a higher stage of socialism, where we can get ready to eliminate scarcity altogether and have it to where, Marx said, to each according to their need. They're not there yet, but they're, working through a step-by-step systematic process to develop their productive forces to the point where they can get there.
Yeah, let me. I want to ask you a little bit more about this. So, I mean, during the time, maybe like the time of the Sino-Soviet split, when China and the Soviet Union started to go different ways, and through when I was young, people that were socialists picked a side. They were either on the Soviet side or the China side or whatever. And the people that were on the China side would talk about Mao's ideas about class struggle under socialism. And that was a relatively new idea that there would be class struggle under socialism. And you talked about the different classes that existed in China at the time of the revolution, and the stars on the flag, etc. Could you talk a little bit about this idea of class struggle under socialism and how it was developed in part to counter what they saw as going on in the Soviet Union, and how that looked exactly, what that means that there's class struggle under socialism.
Yeah, sure. I don't think that the idea of class struggle under socialism, I don't think Mao is really responsible for that in Marxism, but he does emphasize it in a way that really struck a chord during the Sino-Soviet dispute, and the way that things were going in the Soviet Union. I think the way Mao talked about class struggle under socialism resonated in a way then that was important. But Marx talked about eliminating the sort of vestiges of bourgeois right in socialism, that socialism is stamped with the birthmarks of the society that came before it. He talks about this in Critique of the Gotha Program. It's very important that this is why socialism has to move through these phases, is to get rid of the parts of socialism that still look a lot like capitalism, and that there are things like, a wage scale. All these things that continue to exist under socialism have to be restricted and eventually, reduced to a point that we can move past them. Lenin and Stalin also talked about class struggle under socialism, that class struggle will continue to exist under socialism, and in fact, it will intensify under socialism as the bourgeoisie struggles to restore itself. The international bourgeoisie, the imperialists who exist outside of the country, see that this socialist revolution has disrupted business, and they want to bring the socialist country back into the imperialist sphere of influence that's disrupted their markets, right? So there's a contradiction between imperialism and the socialist countries, where imperialist countries are always going to try to overpower and undermine socialism, and go and try to start color revolutions and counter revolutions that can subvert those things. But there's also and certain things like you might have problems with the way that mainly the class struggle under socialism, the way Mao talks about it, is that class struggle happens in the superstructure. And it's a struggle between the sort of way that the bourgeoisie, the bourgeois ideas and bourgeois class formations are able to work through forms of government and planning to sort of transform and give room for corruption and grift and black market sort of activity that can then develop and lead to problems. But it's also like in the case of the Soviet Union after 1956, a sort of revision of Marxist analysis. As the Chinese, I think, were correct to argue that Khrushchev had undermined Marxism in key ways by saying that the Soviet Union was a state of the whole people and no longer a state controlled by the working class, or that it was possible to have peaceful transition to socialism, which is always a key way that the revisionists try to undermine the sort of revolutionary core of Marxism. And China fought back against all those things. And these are bourgeois ideas insinuating themselves into Marxism, and therefore insinuating themselves into the Communist Party. And that's a big part of this idea of class struggle under socialism, is combating revisionist ideas.
Yeah. So, well, let's go into that a little bit. Mao combated, take this idea of a peaceful transition to socialism. What's wrong with that? I mean, it seems like it's a good way to do it, right? It's violence is creates whatever, all kinds of hardships, as well as whatever, it disrupts things. It seems like maybe a good way to get to socialism. Why is it a problem?
It does. Sounds great. It sounds ideal, but we don't live in an ideal world. And one of the things that Marxism gives to us, one of the ways that Marxism is scientific, it's not just scientific in the sense that we test theories in practice, but it's also scientific in the sense that it shows us the way that historical change is governed by laws, right? That there are laws that we can see again and again at work throughout history. And one of those laws seems to be that you cannot make a peaceful transition from capitalism to socialism, simply because the bourgeoisie have all this power, all this money. They have the army, they have the police, and they've shown themselves again and again to do whatever it takes to hang on to that power. So you come to a point where you have to overcome the resistance of the ruling class, just like they did, right? The American Revolution wasn't a peaceful one, right? The British Revolution, the French Revolution, these capitalist revolutions weren't peaceful. They came to power through violence. But it's only when their power is challenged that revolutionary violence is suddenly so bad. And it's not great. Nobody wants violence, but it's a law of history that that's the way that society changes. So when the Soviet Union and other revisionists were saying that we should emphasize peaceful evolution to socialism, a peaceful, democratic, constitutional way to get to socialism. The Chinese were saying you're giving people illusions that aren't really they don't shape up to facts. They don't match with the laws of history. And when they do build up all this power, when the working class does build up strength, it's going to be met with a violent resistance, a violent counter-revolution that they're not going to be prepared for.
Yeah. There's sharp debates, at that time and now, for that matter, within society, within the different organizations that people are a part of, in political parties. And Mao made this distinction about contradictions amongst the people and contradictions between the people and the enemy. Could you talk a little bit about what that is and what that means and why that's significant in terms of differentiating between the different types of arguments or debates or disagreements that you might be involved in?
Yeah, I kind of like to think of it like this. The idea of like some contradictions are like a zero-sum game where one side can only benefit at the expense of the other. And like the contradiction between the working class and the capitalist class is like this. Their gain comes from our exploitation, right? Everything, all their wealth is directly correlates to our growth in poverty and misery, right? The richer they get, the worse it is for us. They get rich by stealing from us, by taking our surplus value. And that contradiction isn't one that we can just like come to a compromise or a simple, like an agreement over, right? The only way to resolve that contradiction is to overthrow the power of the ruling class, of the capitalist class, the exploiters and the oppressors of the broad masses of the people. That's the only way to overcome that contradiction. But some contradictions are not antagonistic. Some contradictions are just like, they could be just a misunderstanding. They're not exploitative in nature. They can change just through educating people and winning people over to a correct viewpoint. And when Mao talked about non-antagonistic contradictions, he was talking about that kind of thing, that through leading by example and through persuasion, we could get people who didn't agree with us to come over to our views. And he talked about that in terms of unity, struggle, unity, or unity, criticism, unity, depending on when he says it. But it means the same thing. That we have start from a desire for unity. Based on that desire for unity, we're going to struggle with people. We're going to explain our differences. We're going to talk through the points of our disagreement, and through that process, we're going to come to a new, higher unity on a new basis. Right? That's the way he explains it. And this is the way that we resolve non-antagonistic contradictions. He also talks about you have to be careful, because if you mishandle non-antagonistic contradictions, they can turn antagonistic. And we have to be careful that that doesn't happen. If it's possible to resolve anything non-antagonistically, we want to do that, right? There's no reason to, like, if the point is to unite all who can be united against the class enemy, then we don't want to antagonize people. We want to draw as many people in as we can. And this process of unity, struggle, unity is the key to doing that. We can do that even amongst ourselves, right? In a revolutionary organization, it's like that. We disagree with each other. We have criticism and self-criticism. And we always do that on this basis of we're seeking unity, right? We want to work together. This contradiction is not antagonistic. We can come to a better understanding and a better unity by like working this out.
Yeah, yeah. So let me circle back then though to I mean the time we were that I'm thinking about the Cultural Revolution, the time just before that, where there was these debates going on about revisionism in the Soviet Union, and eventually the concern was that capitalism would be restored in the Soviet Union. And if we look at today, it wasn't crazy to think that. But Mao actually took the position that capitalism had been restored in the Soviet Union, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your views on that, and how the Chinese Communist Party and Mao Zedong handled these differences with the Soviet Union through that period of time, and the problems that existed in the Soviet Union, how they eventually led to its overthrow. But could you talk about what your views are on that a little bit?
Yeah. China at that time, the Communist Party's view, it started off from like 1956. The Chinese sent a series of letters to the Soviets to try to like struggle through these positions, these differences, and it didn't work. And things got sharper and sharper. Eventually, China and Albania were sort of ostracized from the international communist movement for sort of standing up to Khrushchev. And as that sort of developed and went on, eventually, the Chinese took the view that capitalism had been restored in the Soviet Union. Eventually, that idea developed further into the idea that the Soviet Union was a social imperialist power. They eventually compared the Soviets to Hitler. They said it's a dictatorship of the Hitler type. And I don't think that, like, if we look at the history of the Soviets during that period, that's borne out. The Soviet Union didn't have a monopoly capitalist class. They weren't imperialists. What I think actually happened was that starting with the 20th Congress, after Stalin died, the Khrushchev isolated the left from power through this attack on this so-called anti-party group of like Molotov, Kaganovich, and others, and isolated them and started to institute a series of sort of like attacks on Marxism and a number of things like the Kosygin reforms that would sort of change the way that planning and things like that took place in the Soviet Union. But what happened was that there was a long period of ideological and political degeneration that took place that lasted for 30 years. Went from 1956 to eventually when the Soviet Union was overthrown by Yeltsin and Gorbachev in 1991. So I think the Chinese were wrong, and I think they're self-critical and agree that that position was a mistake, and that it was premature to say that capitalism has been restored in the Soviet Union at that time. But they did draw some important lessons, and came to understand what was going on by the time the Tiananmen Square incident happened in 1989, and they were able to take the things that they learned from the Khrushchev's attack on Stalin and on Marxism, and apply that and prevent a capitalist restoration from taking place in 1989 in China.
So, Josh, what do you think the significance of Mao Zedong thought, or the writings of Mao and his work? What's the significance for activists and revolutionaries today?
I mean, I still think Mao's ideas are universally applicable to wanting to make revolution. I think that if we want to organize and change society, that we need to understand the United Front and the mass line. We need to understand how to build a party through practical struggle, and we need to understand things like dialectical materialism and how to study the contradictions that are at work around us. And people all over the world are applying Mao's ideas. Like you see it in the Philippines. You see it if you read the program of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Mao's all in there, right? And if you want to make revolution in the U.S., Mao's ideas are important to study and understand. I don't think that we can get anywhere without the mass line and without the United Front and without dialectical materialism. And he made such important contributions to all those things.
Yeah, yeah. So unfortunately, our time is almost up here. But I want to give you a chance if there's anything that we didn't say during the interview, or anything you want to add, or any points you want to make before we end here.
Sure. I would like for people to read the article. It's in People's China at 75. Flag Stays Red. It's published by Praxis Press. And it was sort of put forward by Keith Bennett and Cos Martinez, who edited it, and they're with Friends of Socialist China, so check them out. Read my book, The Revolutionary Science of Marxism-Leninism. Read it with other people and study it, but apply that and get involved in mass organizations and join Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Go to frso.org/join. You think these ideas and Mao's ideas are important, and you can see that's where the rubber hits the road.
Okay. Well, we'll put in the show notes the two books. Your book, The Revolutionary Science of Marxism-Leninism, and the one you got the chapter in People's China at 75. The Flag Stays Red. We'll put how to get both of those in our show notes, as well as the FRSO Freedom Road's website, frso.org/join. Is that correct?
Yeah, join.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, thank you so much, Josh. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Richard. Pleasure.
So Jay Sykes, thank you so much. And this was something different for us. You know, it's I hope people learned a little bit about Mao Zedong thought and why Mao is important theoretically, but it's different than our standard activist telling his gig. And I encourage people to buy the book with Josh's chapter in it. It's called People's China at 75. The Flag Stays Red. Or the Flag Stays Red, I'm sorry. And also his previous book, The Revolutionary Science of Marxism-Leninism by Jay Sykes. And I mean, these are important things in terms of thinking about and trying to look at the world scientifically and then trying to change it. And so change it to make it a more just, a better world for everybody. So anyways, I hope people enjoyed this. Let us know if you want to hear more of this kind of thing. Recently we had Masao Suzuki on twice, which is our first, real academic on here. And then Jay Sykes, who's of course a theoretician, writing, about theory, but also, having a history, and both of them having a history and practice as well. So send us an email, richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com, and let us know what you think. Do you want more of this, or do you want us to go back to more activist type of thing? And, so we're anxious to hear what you have to think about that. Finally, I want to thank our production team, Natalie Pranis, Dodd McColgan, Vince Olson, and Shane Tremley. And I'm Richard Berg for the entire Fight Back Radio team, saying until next time, all power to the people.